All right, as folks are finally logging in, I just want to say hello and thank you for being here today. My name is Jeff Frankowiak, and I'm currently the principal of the Rochester Community Schools virtual campus. If you're here with us today from the virtual campus, welcome. It's great to see you. If you're from another school in Rochester Community Schools, we're so excited to have you here as well. You'll find the entire presentation is applicable to everybody. We have right now a Zoom kind of call established, and if you are new to Zoom, you'll notice that there is a chat button in the toolbar. Now you are able to unmute yourselves, but we're asking if you have any questions throughout this presentation, put them in the chat and we'll make sure that we go through it. Now we have created a comprehensive presentation that in some cases might lead to more questions or discussions. That's okay. But we wanted to provide an introduction to IReady. So I'm going to say, invite my co-host here, Mr. Phelps, to say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. As we move into this next slide, my name is Robert Phelps. I am the elementary program consultant at Virtual Campus. I appreciate your support and thank you for being here today. So look at our agenda on the following slide. Mr. Frankowiak has said, if you have any questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat. We will possibly follow up with community and maybe answer some of those questions as we go. This will be the framework of what we're looking at today is really setting up for success in terms of what does the diagnostic testing look like, learning modules, academic achievement currently at Virtual Campus, diagnostic test understanding, digging into the learning modules, connecting with your team. I'm sorry about that, but digging into learning modules, connecting with the teacher, and finally trying to answer a few of your parents submitted questions.
All right, we just have a few joining, so we're just making sure we get them in. Thank you so much, Mr. Phelps. All right, so as we IReady has been exciting tool that we've used instructionally for several years now. And one person on the call right now is Mr. Jeff Tompkins, who has been a great partner with us, with the team at Curriculum Associates, which is the umbrella company for IReady. And as we've worked with them, we've been able to leverage the resources through IReady. But one thing I know in our journey and in our trajectory over the last 5 or 6 years, we know we need to engage our parents as thought partners in this process in a deeper level. And so today is definitely a way that we want to start that conversation, especially with our virtual campus families. So the first thing with IReady is there's an assessment component. And this arguably is probably the piece that if you ask students what IReady is, they would probably go there first. And the assessment is something that takes place in the elementary level 3 times a year. And we're excited because we launched it at the middle school level this year, which will be twice a year. So students take these assessments and they're able to give us data on how they perform specifically in the umbrella topics of reading and math. Now, you will find social studies components and some science components underneath those umbrellas. The biggest thing is in reading and math, that is where the assessments are focused with IReady. Now, that is the online instruction. And this is something we're very excited about because as families, this is the part, I guess you would say like the 3-legged stool that you really can take a active role in your students' education. Talk a little bit about that through this presentation, but the online instruction are instructional modules provided by IReady that help students increase their proficiency and increase their knowledge in these assessments. The last thing, and arguably one of the most important pieces, is instruction and making sure that the teacher is connected, not only as a mentor, but also as a coach for students in this type of a setup. Now, as we dive a little bit deeper, you're going to see that there are 3 tiers in a quality MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support. And one of the things that we want to highlight is this is a concept that we could spend a number of sessions on talking about what a quality MTSS process looks like. The thing that I really want you to keep in mind is tier 1, that green area, all students receive those supports. And that is typically what we call a core solid, like package of instruction. So for instance, in literacy, you might have heard of something they call the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. We felt like that's such a great core set of instructional strategies and content that we're going to catch as many kids as possible when it comes to literacy. Tier 2, now these are some, for interventions that are targeted, but involve some students. These are students that teachers might just pull together in a small focus group, or might find ways to give them a little extra boost for some supplementary assignments. And then tier 3 are those students that just need a little bit more of an intense support. It's possible a kid or a student could be in tier 1 for one subject area, but might be in tier 3 in another subject area. It's also important to notice that our goals as schools is to look at these systems, get as students into tier 1 as many of those students as possible. And that's where IReady is one of those important tools as we do that. So some IReady data up there from the virtual campus, because I know that's the majority of our families joining, but this is how we use these tools. So IReady, as I said, there's 2 major assessment packages, and that's math and reading. And this is full, transparent, real data that we have campus this year. Now, the big thing you'll see here is in the fall, and for both reading and math, that is the left side of the screen, you'll see that we have a pyramid, and we're it's very important for us to look at that pyramid because we can see and where they need intervention. And you can see right now, just not even being an educator, that students in reading performed a little bit stronger or with the reading assessment than they did with math. And so what our job to do is provide strategies and resources using those online instructional modules from IReady, and teacher strategies as well through a bag of tricks that we try to create for each of our teachers to have those pyramids shape a little bit more in the green area. As you can see from winter now, and there was basically about 3.5 months from the fall assessment to the winter, you'll see that the pyramid looks a little bit more healthy with tier 1. That means our interventions are working. We also know we have students still at tier 3, as we talked about, and in tier 2 as well. And we're going to continue to work on that. But the nice thing is you can see as educators, as we look at systems, our pyramids are going in the right direction. And that's one of the things we really want to look at and how we use IReady to do that. Now, one part is the assessment. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Phelps, and he's going to talk specifically about that assessment leg.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. One thing I want to mention is that this session is recorded and we will be sending this out to families. We also want you to know that we will be providing these slides as a, so please know that if you can't take notes, that we will be sending out these slides, and we won't be reading everything verbatim, and you will get them at a later time. So we are going to be diving a little bit more into the assessment. This is a sample of a diagnostic assessment from a child. This is something you could possibly receive from a classroom teacher if you requested it. This is a family sample letter, and this is the math portion of what you might have received. And I want to talk about the assessment and what the test is being given to the students in particular. So we have a student here, they've tested in September, and they've also tested in January. We notice that the green area above is what we consider on grade level. You'll notice that this second grader in math is at grade level 2 at the start of September, or in September. And you'll also notice a scale score, and a scale score is very different from a raw score percentage. We're really looking at a number of factors when navigating scale scores, the difficulties, the levels of those questions. What's important is not the number, but the growth that you see from a scaled score. So this child is starting out at 430 scaled score right at grade level in September, and you'll see that there is a national norm. So this is saying out of a national average, this child is performing at about the 86th percentile. Now, as school goes on through the year, and you can request this test sheet for families from your classroom teacher, you'll see that in January, this child has grown and their scaled score is higher now. And I want you to know at the elementary level right now, we are testing students 3 times a year on this diagnostic. September, you can see in January, and one more time at the end of the year. Middle school is now taking a look at IReady diagnostic testing too. And you'll see that we are testing them at the beginning of the year and end of the year, but we will be moving to 3 times next year at the virtual campus. One thing I want to highlight for you are the domains, and this will be a main theme of what I talk about, but the domains are the areas in which the IReady will test them on. So you can see here overall, the domains are number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. And you can then see the test broken down. This child, when we're looking at where they are at and how teachers need to teach, as this is one data point, we see that they're at grade level and numbers and operations and algebra, but they're approaching grade level 2 in measurement and data and geometry. So they're hanging down just a little bit lower. And this is a lot of good information for that teacher. They take that information, they work on those standards with the students, and you can see in January, this is exactly what we want to happen. We want the students' scaled score to grow, and we want these areas or domains to grow. And you can see they're at grade level 2 now in January. So go ahead and we'll move on to this next slide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on breaking the domains down for you, but this will be a resource for you that you will receive, and you can read through it. But when we're looking at the domains and what that covers in the mathematics domain, we are talking numbers and operations. We're talking about adding and subtracting, multiplying, different types of numbers, algebra and algebraic thinking. We're taking those numbers, we're solving equations, creating word problems. As we go on to the next slide, we are looking at measurement and data. So we are using skills collecting and organizing and interpreting. And finally, in geometry, we're asking them to look at 2- and 3-dimensional shapes and really building this and scaffolding their learning, as we know that IReady goes from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. So when we look at a reading sample for families, we can see here, again, I don't need to reiterate, but this green is on grade level. This student has started the year very strong in reading 2nd grade. I want to bring your attention to the Lexile reading level. This will tell you when you receive this report what reading level your child is at. There are many apps at home that you can download on your phone, and you can look up book titles, and it comes in the Lexile level. So you'll know exactly if the level is a good fit for your child from the diagnostic, one data point. In Rochester, we use Fontes and Pinnell or other reading measurement tools. You might have heard that your child's at a level M or a level R. Those are the reading measurements we use. But again, to focus in on the domains, that's the most important part of instruction and supporting students. We're looking at phonological awareness, phonics. Oops, if we could go back 1 second, I'm not yet done. High frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension literature, and comprehension informational text. One thing I want to highlight before we move on is you'll notice this child is testing out and maxing out in these first 3 domains. All right, thank you. We can go on. And I'm going to briefly talk about phonological awareness is the building parts of a word, the letters, the sounds. We take that into phonics and we combine those into words and understandings with those letters and sounds. And we move on to high frequency words. And we're taking everything we learn, and we know the high frequency words early on in a child's career, I, me, but, see, all of these words. And as the earlier children max out of the score, the diagnostic will no longer be testing them in those areas because they're showing capacity. And what our higher elementary students and our upper and our middle school students are seeing is that they're going to be focusing on vocabulary, words of origin, more complex words. And then finally on the next page, we're looking at comprehension literature in fiction and comprehension informational text as well. And we know that these are skill areas that we're going to keep building within our students through 8th grade.
Thank you so much on that, Robert. I think one of the big things that we look at is why do we use IReady and why is it so important as a measure? Well, the things that really appealed to us is it's nationally normed. So not only can we look at Rochester Community Schools and how our students are doing, we now have not only years of data to look at so we can see how students are progressing through our grade levels, but we also have national norms scores to look at, which means we're looking at scores of traditionally where kids who are 3 years in school or like third grade, how they're performing coast to coast. And so when Robert talks about some of those scores, those benchmarks are set on a national norm level. The last thing I want to say too, the value of this is the state of Michigan, the Michigan Department of Education, sets an assessment package called the Michigan or the M-STEP assessment. And it's one of those things of the whole concept is the Michigan Merit Curriculum is assessed of how well we're doing as a public school and how we're pulling that content in. Well, IReady has a significant correlation to that M-STEP. The challenge with M-STEP is students typically take it if you have a third grader on up in the spring, we often would get those reports back and those instructional reports back months later. Well, with IReady, we now know how students are progressing, but not only just at those M-STEP benchmarks, which it's aligned to, but 3 times a year. So we can make what we would say course corrections, or we can change our intervention plans to meet the specific needs for our students. So that's why when we have students complete these assessments, and especially this year when those assessments have been completed at home, they're so important to us because I know they're not graded, they don't show up on a report card, but they let us know of how we can impact instruction. So it's kind of a good way to see. So how as parents can you fit in? So that second piece, as you remember, is that and I pulled some of these resources directly from the Curriculum Associates materials that they put out because I want to highlight why we do things in this way, but they've also guided through research of showing why these times and these recommended times are set. So you now have access, and Robert's going to walk through a little bit more of an orientation in a minute, but your student now has access to the online math and the online reading modules through IReady. And that's a very exciting resource for us because kids in tier 1, kids in tier 2, and kids in tier 3 all can benefit from participating in these modules. And so what that means is, on average, we really encourage our students to participate about an hour per week. And that could mean 2 30-minute sessions. That means it could be 1 hour per week, but that is 1 hour per week per subject. So essentially it's 2 hours per week. You know your child, and your child, as they get older, will learn about themselves, of how they learn and how they absorb information. So for some students, it might be some benefit to have a routine. Some students, it might be, you know what, before they go to bed, let's have them work on some IReady online modules. For some students, you might find whatever it works for you. The benefit is, especially, and Robert will talk about, they will have access to these modules all summer long. And it's not to take a summer away from a student, but it is one of the things that if students, kind of like the old adage, use it or lose it, if they use it and they're continuing to practice to these modules, they're going to come into the fall that much stronger as a student. The one thing I want to highlight too is that pass rate. So IReady will allow students to participate on a module or a series of modules on a concept. They'll have 2 attempts before they're in essence kind of locked out and the teacher has to intervene. And so what I mean by that is if a student is showing that they're hitting some type of a struggle on a concept, gone through the online instruction with IReady and they're still having challenges, that third part of that stool kicks in where the teacher-led support will jump in. So teachers are really meant to intervene and again, dip into that bag of tricks and to help out. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go a little quicker on this part, but you can see teachers have these reports to monitor their entire progress and intervene as well, but they also get an alert. But the biggest thing is, as a parent at home, what we've learned through pandemic learning, that's what I guess the state is calling what we've been going through with COVID, is that if families are going to help, making sure that they are taking an awareness, which you're doing by being here, of what your student is participating in, but then encouraging them to keep up with the routines and just keep at it. And sometimes having that coach at home really helps. So the next thing is, let's look at a student, Joel Gonzalez. Now, Joel Gonzalez is a 4th grader with math, and this might relate to your child if you receive one of these reports of like, oh my gosh, he's a 4th grader, but IReady is putting him at the 2nd grade level. That he needs to go back to 2nd grade or should be retained in any way. What that means is there are skill sets that we have to focus on at the 2nd grade level. And as an added bonus, IReady is able to differentiate it per student. With teachers working on strategies and working with the full class in front of them, they will work and continue to differentiate for Joel, but iReady will provide that for there. So as Robert went through, there's 4 domains in math. You will see in this case, algebra and algebraic thinking and measurement and data are throwing Joel off. So the online modules are going to focus on early second grade level areas for these concepts and continue to provide lessons until those skills are increased. And so as they're increased, they're going to bring them up to kind of a standard level where there's an alignment between all the domains. And then it's going to continue to excel. Now, the one thing we're not going to go into is if your student is ahead or at grade level already, one differentiation is that they will continue to go past their grade level standards as well. So, one of those things that when you look at an MTSS pyramid, we kind of showed part of the process where we're looking at how to catch kids up, but there's a whole nother aspect of that of what do we do when kids are already at grade level and want to accelerate. Well, the nice thing is all the way through grade 8 benchmarks, students have access to, and they'll just continue to go until they top out with whatever level's appropriate. So it's kind of exciting. So Robert, do you mind walking through a brief orientation of what they would see on their dashboard?
Absolutely. So you're going to see that for our younger learners, it looks similar to this in both reading and math. And I think as children are older in middle school, you'll see that the screen matures and has a little bit of a different look, but it's pretty similar. I want to just highlight a few things to you in the upper left. You can toggle between reading and math lessons. There's 2 important things to really notice here when a child logs on. On the left, teachers have assigned lessons to students based on diagnostic needs or even feedback they're receiving within the classroom. So they'll assign lessons. Now, some teachers may prefer that students finish those assigned lessons first, but on the right side, you're going to notice in green, the next lesson on my path. That lesson is directly connected to how that child did on the diagnostic. And what we do know about the diagnostic is it will challenge children until they get about 50% of their questions wrong. And that's why, as Jeff was saying, it is important to let them do that test on their own because this lesson is directly related. And I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. The close reading should only be done with teacher guidance or an adult support. It's a much more challenging lesson. I would focus on the green lessons and the teacher assigned lessons. So when you go to the next slide, you'll see my progress button. And this is important to be aware of as a parent. It'll show you time on task, how many minutes your child has done that week, how many lessons they've passed, and how many lessons they've passed in a row. And when you click on the button completed work, you'll go to the next slide and you'll start to notice what the percentage is for that child. And it's really important to be monitoring and thinking about that threshold of 70% for our learners. And I'll talk a little bit more about what happens when you don't hit that threshold on the next slide. So just some of the tips, and these are questions brought up, and I'm trying to answer from just my own experience helping support the district. But iReady lessons are in 3 parts, and they typically take anywhere between 15 to 25 minutes. And what's really important is the first part is the lesson, the next part is the practice, and the last part is the quiz. And I oftentimes like to tell my students, when you're finished, I want you to show me your score on the quiz. And unless they can show you that score, unless they can show you the percentage, they are not done. Oftentimes they get confused with the progress bar at your screen. It'll say 80% done, 90% done, but that's only for the progress of that portion of the lesson. Now, like Jeff said, 70% or higher. When a child, if you're noticing on their iReady that they receive less than 70%, no need to panic. That lesson will repeat. It's important at that point that an adult or the teacher steps in to maybe work with that child in some capacity. Oftentimes I'll just sit with a child and I'll listen to some of the language they don't necessarily understand of how the question is being asked for them. However, if a child does receive a score of 70% or lower 2 times, this domain, like I talked about earlier, like numbers and operations, will close until the student receives some form of instruction with that area. And that's because we don't want students to stay in a domain struggling, and we want them to feel this growth. So unless the teacher intervenes at that point, that domain will close. Once, like I said, direct support is provided on that particular lesson, it can be reassigned and domains can be turned back on. And I'll talk a little bit about how direct support could look in the classroom and how you might want to participate at home. And let's not forget, like Jeff said, this curriculum spirals up through 8th grade standards. It is a wonderful enrichment as a supplement to our great curriculum in Rochester Community Schools for students who want to hit some of those higher standards. So on this last formal page, I want to talk a little bit more about how do you start having a conversation around some challenges you're having on IReady. So I hear often IReady lessons are too hard or they're too easy. And there's lots of reasons why that is. At times, the diagnostic hasn't been taken independently and there's been too much support. So we'll notice students are having lessons that are too challenging for them. Or students have rushed and they didn't take their time. They're still building their stamina around a standardized test and their lessons are too easy. What you can do is you can reach out to the teacher and say, oh, you know what? These IReady lessons seem too hard or too easy. The teacher has the ability to adjust the learning path in any of the domains. So make sure teachers are aware of that. You can reach out to them, have conversations around that as well. Ask questions about the domains, right? As a parent, you might be wondering, what domains are my child really doing well in? What areas should I be helping them at home focus more on? That's an okay question as well. Say, let me know what the domains are on their IReady and what it tells me. So if you're looking for more differentiated work, you're noticing your son or daughter is struggling on certain domains, we've teamed up with IReady. They've provided us with what's called the IReady toolbox. And it's a wonderful curriculum of differentiated work that can be sent home in addition and lined up with some of these lessons. So if you're looking for more differentiated work, some teachers are using it in their classrooms, but they're more than willing to send additional IReady toolbox lessons home. Are you wondering what standards teachers might be working on? Make sure you ask them what areas should my child be focusing on. And you might also be wondering how your child might be doing between the testing windows, especially if we have any of our middle school parents on, because we're only doing the beginning of the year and end of the year. At any time, you can ask a teacher, if your child's done a bunch of lessons, hey, could you throw on a growth monitoring check? And that is a simple 15-minute test that'll give us a nice quick snapshot into how your child is doing while they're working on a number of these lessons. So you can always reach out to the teacher for them to assign one of these growth monitoring checks. Teachers are using this information to support their instruction. It is one data point. This is one additional supplement. We are so happy that the district and working with Curriculum Associates has provided us. So make sure you're asking questions. You can reach out to myself as well. And those licenses are going to be available through August 20th.
Just want to highlight some of our contact information if you'd like to stay connected. We did get some questions in the chat too that I would like to go over, but if you do follow us on social media, whether, like I said, you're a family from the brick and mortar context, like in a physical building, or if you're with us at virtual, we definitely are pushing stuff out that's relevant for everybody. And the one thing I highlight too is the parent series and just the concept of what you have here, the family series. Robert's our program consultant that we've been launching them this year. As I said, one thing we've learned through pandemic learning is just the importance of connecting with our parents as partners in education. So just thank you for being here. Please encourage, if you have neighbors, family members who are also family or have students in our district, to encourage our next ones. So the last thing I just want to say before the questions is that the MTSS, that multi-tiered system we talked about, has been one of those things where we wanted to make sure that we were showing what that concept is. So Karen Gillard call too. She's one of our central office administrators. She's running point on kind of a district-wide MTSS system. So please stay tuned with that. If you are interested of knowing more, just know that that is going to come out. The important thing that we just want to highlight is our goal is to create a differentiated learning and a way for students to have their needs met with their specific growing edges and those certain areas that they may need some enrichments because they're ready to move on. So we want to just commitment to personalized learning paths. So one question that we received in the chat was that is IReady used for placement for things such as honors or advanced classes? I know this is another conversation as well. We've been going away with some of those honors or advanced classes specifically at the middle school level because that differentiation can happen within the classroom and what we can do to offer differentiated and personalized learning paths for all kids. So the short answer is no, IReady is used more to inform instruction and to help us connect resources for students. That's why we wanted to show the benefit of how this connects to our curriculum and the state standards. But it's also something that, you know, it gives us a snapshot for your individual child, but we do not want to put anything on there that's going to have a kid feel like there's any testing anxiety based on grades or based on, you know, to impact their future. So we use IReady specifically to give us and families a good measurement of how students are doing in those areas. Again, it's one measure. We do use other measures, but it has been a really good way for us to do that. So just as we begin to wrap up, we want to be sensitive of time. Are there any more questions? If so, if you can throw them in the chat, we can wait for a minute or two. And as that's wrapping up too, as we said, the recording will be posted. The slides available as well. We also have an IReady parent support site that's going to give you tutorials for accessing the online modules and whatnot. So if your student hasn't modules and they want to, we'll provide some resources as well, and we can definitely go ahead. So you know, the biggest thing is family just saying that they wish their students' IReady scores a little bit higher and would have access for IReady this summer. So the answer is yes, you have access to IReady for reading and math throughout the entire summer. That will end, I believe Mr. Phelps said, middle of August 20th. And so definitely, and like we said, when it comes to things about keeping students engaged and ready for the fall, we've seen it through summer programming, and we've seen a lot of success. Prior to this year, we were the Longmeadow principal and learning consultant as well. We used IReady for our students throughout the summer, and it was really strong taking with it. If you're having trouble accessing it and want to make sure that your students have, feel free to give us a call here. I know Robert would be happy to talk with you. We have a team here as well. You know, our contact info is on our site. But the thing is, I want to highlight that there's a question about, can teachers adjust to the correct level? Teachers can definitely move levels, but the levels are automatically shifted from the previous assessment. So meaning that the most recent IReady assessment was taken about a month and a half ago. So the current IReady modules are aligned to that assessment. When students take the assessment again in about a month from now, they're going to get realigned to their most recent assessment. But teachers can go in, assign additional things, or they can adjust those levels as well. So it's kind of a cool thing to see with that. If you do have questions about it, definitely start with your teacher. We are continuing to build capacity and helping coaching our teachers with using these tools. Always fall back with your learning consultant, or if you're at virtual, like I said, give us a call. You know, one question is, the questions will be harder because the assessment, if you're talking about the assessment, the questions get harder because it wants to see in each of those domains that Robert covered about where the material kind of tops out at and where they should start helping to build like skills and muscles. But the other thing too is, you know, if the online modules should be appropriately placed. Now, if the online modules are tough and your students getting frustrated with it, please don't have them keep working at it. Connect with your teacher so we can provide some supports. We do not want this to be something that students do not want to do. They try to make it fun by putting coins and stuff and games that kids can, and things they can buy with those imaginary coins to personalize their experience. But if it is causing anxiety or frustration because it's tough, definitely ask for a conference with your teacher. I know we're in parent-teacher conference season, but if you've already had that and you didn't talk about it, request an appointment with your teachers. Diagnostic tests are beyond the grade level. Yes, they are. And so it's one of those things that they go all the way up through 8th grade. And so it's one of those things that they do that because, again, just because a kid is 4 years in school or in 4th grade doesn't mean that they're going to live in that 4th grade benchmark window. Some might be a little lower, some might be a little higher. So the IReady assessment casts a wide net to get that true level for each student. Yes, the presentation will be posted. Mr. Phelps is really good. We'll get it posted on a YouTube link and sending it out by email with this group. We do share it on all of our social media channels through the virtual campus. That's why you'll definitely want to follow us if you can. But we also send it out on School Messenger as well. But yes, we want to make these available. And if you have an idea for a future parent series, let us know. We're going to spend some time on this too, of engaging families for help at home. And we can definitely do that. So, gosh, it was so good to see such a large group of families here. I know Mr. Phelps and I were both very excited. So if there are no more questions, like I said, LCs at your home schools, if you want us, we're here. And if not, enjoy this beautiful, beautiful spring weekend that we're having in Michigan. So take care, everybody, and we'll see you at the next session. Mm-hmm.